and good morning. Good morning to everyone and welcome on today's webinar of the ODA Learning Series 2021. My name is Eva Latinova and I work as Innovation Specialist at the UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub, and I'll be a moderator of today's session. And before we will immerse ourselves with the topic, let me share some basic rules and tips for the webinar. So please do not forget to be muted if you are not speaking. Write your questions in the chat box. We will explore them during our Q&A session. And please switch on the cameras. We would like to see you and we would like to create a little bit of in-person feeling. Great, thank you so much. Great to see you all. So our team has been organizing this capacity building series from 2014. And we are happy to see that, the online version is going well under these so-called, new normal settings. Our thanks goes to OECD as a strategical partner for co-organizing. And many thanks to you all who joins the webinar on a regular basis. Today, we will focus on data in development cooperation. We will discuss the opportunities that data provides from a programmatic view, and as well as also the development consideration from the operational view. And we will try to answer three basic hows. How can we better support data ecosystems in low-income countries? How can development practitioners use data for more efficient and effective programming, and how to improve data capacity within development organizations? So let me introduce to you our speakers and their topics. I am very glad to say that we will start firstly with the focus on the experience from the international organizations and their lessons learned and key practices. We will start with the World Bank and Mallarbi Verapan, and afterwards, we will focus on OECD and Ida McDonald. Afterwards, we will focus on the example of the experience from the national agency perspective, represented today by Korean International Development Agency and Jason Bay, Data Innovation Team Manager from the Center of Digital Innovation. And at the end, we will hear more about the UNDP practices, and we will focus on one particular experience from our team, represented here today by Katarzyna Roześleniec from Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland. So I am very glad to welcome you here all today. And now I would like to give a floor to Mallarbi, Senior Data Scientist from World Bank. She will speak about the experience of World Bank, and she will focus on the latest data report, Data for Better Lives, World Bank has prepared during this year. So Mallarbi, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you to the organizers and to everyone who has taken time to be here today. I'll provide a quick overview of recommendations from the report, which hopefully sets the context for today's very exciting discussion. Let me begin with an example. In 2013, when a cyclone ripped through India's Odisha state, nearly 1 million people were evacuated. But the loss of life, while tragic, was limited to 38. Only 14 years earlier in 1999, a similar storm caused almost 10,000 fatalities. What made the difference? Odisha's Disaster Management Authority had invested in weather forecast data, and effectively using and disseminating the data helped them implement disaster response measures, which helped ultimately save many lives. In this example, the government actors use data effectively for positive outcomes. But other actors can also use data to improve outcomes. So to guide our thinking in the report, we use the conceptual framework shown in this slide, where we have three primary pathways by which data is produced and by which data can lead to better outcomes. The key set of actors are government and international organizations running through the central pathway, individual civil society and academia running through the top channel, and private sector through the bottom channel. There are several examples that we cover in the report where actors outside of the government have produced and used data for better development outcomes. One example is HarassMap, a citizen-led initiative that mapped out individual reports of sexual harassment in an effort to promote change and create safe spaces in Egypt. When civil society and individuals and academia use data, it can be a powerful force to create greater transparency and accountability of both public and private sectors. Governments can use data to improve programs, policies, and the targeting of scarce resources to marginalized people and areas. And when private firms use data, they can improve decision-making and efficiency and better match supply with demand. They can use data to fuel platform-based business models that stimulate economic activity and international trade and services. All of these lead to economic growth and improve the lives of people. Many of us are enthusiastic people who believe in the power of data to help people. But we also clearly recognize that data is a double-edged sword and has great potential to harm people. For example, a government could use data to undertake political surveillance or target certain social groups for discrimination. Private sector actors could exploit market power arising from data to take advantage of their customers, or individuals could access data illegally for criminal purposes. We devote a great deal of discussion around this in the report, because without properly addressing these concerns, this future where data is a powerful positive force is in danger, creating a world of missed opportunities. A distinction of this World Development Report relative to many other reports on data is that we focus on how these issues affect poor people in poor countries. Concerns about any of these issues are particularly relevant for poor people and marginalized groups who are less likely to be reflected in data and less likely to participate in the data economy. And many of the concerns are even more salient in poor countries where institutional and regulatory frameworks that ensure safe and ethical use of data are typically weaker. A central attribute of data is that it's non-rivalrous or completely reusable, and yet data is frequently used once and filed away. For this reason, we assert in the report that much of the value of data to improve lives is left untapped. An important message of the report is that we all need to work to find ways to get more value out of data, find ways to reuse data, to repurpose data, and to find insights to unexpected problems. This means greater access to data and greater sharing of data. This is what we're aiming to convey in the middle part of our framework, where arrows run back and forth across all data users in the society. In Uganda, for example, to improve procurement outcomes, local government entities made administrative procurement data from the bidding process available to civil society. The civil society organizations trained community members to understand the information in the contracts and to conduct site checks to verify it. The findings led to reforms to ensure that contracts comply with national procurement standards, and the National Procurement Agency ultimately upgraded its procurement portal to meet international contracting norms, making Uganda the first country to do so. Disadvantaged groups are sometimes left out of government efforts to collect data because governments fail to acknowledge inclusion of those groups as a public policy objective. Individuals must then often collect the data needed to empower themselves. That data, when merged with existing data sets, can help fill a gap that neither public sector nor private sector can fill. In Bogota, Colombia, for example, the city government used a mapping-based mobile app called Safety Pin to map safety around bike paths. The biking community helped collect images along the 230 kilometers of bike paths in the city, which were then analyzed by Safety Pin, as shown in the map here. This analysis supported the authorities in understanding where to improve lighting and add closed-circuit TV cameras and bike stands so as to make women feel safer using the bike paths after dark. The data was also then reused by the municipal government by integrating with other data sources for land use planning purposes. All this reuse and repurposing of data are opening doors to development impacts previously unimaginable. So how do we ensure greater production, access, and use of data that meets the needs of all individuals in the society? Why would people be willing to participate in calls for collecting and using more data? In the report, we argue that one large part of the answer lies in the realization of a new social contract for data. First, any sort of agreement requires that the participants have something to gain from the contract, that value is created through the agreement. Realizing greater value from data requires both that more people have access to data and that data is shared more, reused more, and repurposed to solve development problems. That means it requires participation of all people. Improving economic and social well-being entails that data coverage, infrastructure, and training data include poor people and poor countries, including marginalized groups. The only way to ensure people participate is to ensure everyone gains from participation. One dimension of equity is coverage. That is to say that data covers all people. As one example of this is the lack of data coverage of women that is a particular problem across the world. And finally, without trust, there's no reason that people will participate. People need to trust that value will be created and that they will share in some of the benefits of the value created and that they will not be harmed from the use of the data. The second part of the report provides significant discussions on the safeguards necessary to protect people from misuse of data. Ultimately, they also need to trust in the integrity of the data and that is used in transparent ways and that they're able to trust the validity and quality of data. In the report, we're very clear that the social contracts will be different in all countries, reflecting the heterogeneity of cultures, values, and laws. But we assert that all social contracts need to be based on three principles: value, trust, and equity. It's important to recognize that social contracts have existed for centuries and they're reflected in legal systems across the world. But we need these contracts now to adapt to this new world where data is deeply interwoven into our lives. While social contracts provide the rules and compliance mechanisms for how data can be safely shared, used, and reused by all stakeholders, to realize data's potential, this framework must be built around data systems that not only ensures safety, but also actively promotes access to data. The World Development Report offers an aspirational vision of what we're calling an integrated national data system, or INDS, which aims to enhance data flows across different stakeholders, allowing all to benefit from data use and facilitating innovative, creative uses of data to solve existing and, quite importantly, emerging problems. Well, it's clear that for most of the countries that are the focus of this report, they're very far away from this aspiration. Nonetheless, it's important to provide a clear description of what countries should be aiming for as they take steps towards improving their use of data. But what does it take to implement this social contract, and how do we go from the conceptual nature of the social contract to creating the ambitious integrated data system? All this requires tremendous improvements in data governance frameworks in all countries. In the report, we discuss this as a series of 4 layers that build upon and support one another, as you can see in this slide. I won't go into detail, but provide a brief overview. But in the report, we allocate a chapter for each of these governance frameworks with more detailed policy recommendations. The first layer, which is a foundation, is the policy framework for data infrastructure. Both the policy that make it possible for people to connect to internet data services and the policies that ensure that countries have adequate infrastructure to exchange, store, process data efficiently with the internet. Next is the legal and regulatory environment for data, which creates the rules to enable the sharing and reuse of data while safeguarding against their potential abuse and misuse. Particularly, the report advocates that the regulation of personal data must be grounded in human rights frameworks. The legal and regulatory framework for data has significant consequences for wider economic policy goals, affecting a country's ability to harness the economic value of data through competition, trade, and taxation. Finally, reforms in institutional ecosystem will ensure that data can deliver on its potential and laws and regulation and policies are effectively enforced. Given the global scale of the data ecosystem, some of the most challenging aspects of the social contract call for closer international cooperation to harmonize principles, regulations, and coordinate on policies that will enable data use while protecting against harmful misuse of data. Finally, here, there are several important considerations for governing data effectively that we discuss in the report. I'll highlight 2 here that are becoming really critical. The first one is leadership, and in some cases, more broadly, the political economy considerations that play an important role in creating a culture of data use and sharing. The second is data literacy across all sections of the society, starting from technicians, policymakers, and the general public, which is important for ensuring a multi-stakeholder governance and more meaningful participation of all stakeholders. With that, I finally present here some of the really top-level messages from the report. as a key takeaway. And I really look forward to the discussions from that's going to follow me from my other speakers during today's events. Thank you very much again. And you can also find extensive resources here at the WDR website, blogs that we produced, background papers, and new data that we produced as part of the report here at this site. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malar. It was really amazing opening, and the layout of your presentation was outstanding. Thank you so much for this. Colleagues, if you are interested to see the report Data for Better Lives, you can see the link here in chat. Please also do not forget to post your questions in the chat. And I have a lot of questions to Malar, but we will go back to them at the end. And right now, I would like to give the floor to Ida McDonald. Hello, Ida, welcome here. Ida McDonald leads the OECD flagship Development Cooperation Report and Data for Development Programming. So we are really excited to have her here today and to listen about the experience of the DAC members' support for data and lessons learned from this process. So over to you, Ida, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Eva. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon. I'm not sure how many time zones we're covering, but it's a pleasure to join you this morning. And very happy to follow Malar's great presentation. I think over 1.5 years ago, Malar and I sat down together and said, how do we do flagship reports? They're big projects, and we should really, I think, have a seminar someday to tell the world about the intricacies of doing such such massive reports. And it's really great that I'm also able to continue working on data for development after we did one of our reports on that in 2017. Today, I'll give you a sense really of how members of the OECD, predominantly members of the Development Assistance Committee, are investing in data and statistical systems in the developing countries. I'm going to share some challenges linked with that, but also some trends and insights from our analysis of how a subset of DAC members who are most active in this space from a financing perspective, but also from a technical assistance perspective, are operating. And actually going to end then on an optimistic note, really pointing to real opportunities we have now to come together a bit more, to join forces and really improve the way in which we invest in data and statistical systems for much better development outcomes. And I think it will be very consistent. It is very consistent with what Malar is suggesting. So if we could go to the next slide. Over the past 2.5 years, the OECD's Development Cooperation Directorate has been working, it was rather new work stream actually, bringing together some of the countries that are most active in data and statistics as a group, as an informal network, to really discuss how we can both improve the levels of financing, but also the quality of investments in national statistical systems. And then a key objective there was also to bridge a very dynamic world and community in statistics and data, and you would have probably been participating in the UN World Data Forum. There's the UN Statistical Division, there's obviously the World Bank, which is a leader in this space, but there's lots of international organizations, but a very vibrant data and statistical community who are kind of, I would say in many ways, frustrated with the way in which maybe concessional development finance like ODA is or is not adequately investing in data and statistical systems and being strategic. So really, we wanted to bridge those communities, but also improve the evidence base of what actually is happening in development cooperation. And our starting point for a lot of this work are the 3 paradoxes that are presented in this slide. And really, we're through dialogue, peer learning, analysis, we're exchanging around these paradoxes and how to turn them really into improvements and into solutions. And the first paradox I just want to briefly mention is the reality, and I think you're all here today because of that reality, is that demand is growing for data and for more and better data. Clearly, the SDGs are a key component in there as a data-driven agenda. There's a stronger emphasis in development cooperation, the 160 billion of ODA and much more, to be evidence-based, to be driven by evidence, but also to quantify the contribution of development cooperation to development results. And so there are efforts to attribute development results from projects, to quantify, etc. So there's also quite a pressure there. And then there's the additional momentum around digitalization and the way in which the kind of digital economy, digital tools are actually producing an awful lot of data. You can call them digital breadcrumbs. There's lots of different ways of coining that. And really, this is for the digitalization factor is really spurring demand by policymakers worldwide to get more data, to fill data gaps, to use new sources of data. At the same time, the foundational systems in countries are not up to scratch. They're not really in a position to really seize many of those opportunities or to align all the various interests. And so I'm sure you may have heard of Paris 21. It produces a report, the Partnership for Statistics in the 21st Century, produces a report every year that looks at financing, external financing for statistical systems. And that's been stagnant at around 600 million per year. So there's actually very little support there in terms of improving the foundational systems that can really seize the opportunity of high demand. The second paradox is very related, I think, to international cooperation, where there is a complaint that on the one hand, there's not enough data. We have loads of data gaps. We can, gather more data, produce more data, conduct more surveys. And on the other hand, a lot of the data that actually exists is not used, not shared. And there are some concerns there. There's a very interesting piece of work by the researchers and aid data, which talks about data graveyards. There's so much produced, so much financing put into data, and yet we wonder, really, it's not clear how much of that's used. And then the third paradox is around a lot of international statements around the importance of data, including through the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. And in the last statement they had in Nairobi, we had the outcome document mentioned the importance of data and statistics around 51 times in 44 pages. And yet there really is an inertia in translating these commitments into action, into progress, into behavior change, which is also linked with the other paradoxes. So that's framing our discussion, and I'm going to take you through some of the opportunities listed there. We can turn to the next slide. I want to just share with you what we're seeing from the Development Assistance Committee members. And here you'll see that really in line with the first paradox, there is a really growing interest and investment in projects that have a data component. They're not all predominantly maybe data driven. They're not necessarily building national statistical systems, but we see basically 180-fold increase since the 2000s up to 2019 in references to data and project description. So this is really indicative of a trend, and we're thinking it's around 2 billion in the kind of broadest way of ODA on data. As I mentioned, though, the share of that that's going to national foundational systems is very low and is stagnant, if not declining. And what we're seeing in this kind of support is that it's a lot of project type support and funding for regional or global initiatives of the multilateral organizations. So there would be like trust funds, and there have been in the World Bank, for example, in building statistical systems that a lot of the bilaterals are contributing to. At the same way, joint approaches have been tapering off over the past few years, and so we think there's some work to be done there. So I guess the message here really is as the level of interest is really growing, there really is a case now for a much more strategic approach to data, for data strategies, for much more holistic data strategies in also the development cooperation, in the cooperation world. And so in line with that now, let me turn to the next slide and tell you really an output of our work, and I won't rest here for too long, is that we really did a kind of an analysis of there's about 15 countries that are very active on that 600 million and more to national statistical systems. What are their priorities? A kind of a scoping of what are their priorities, where are they spending, what countries are they spending in, etc. And we produced in June this year, very, very closely with all of these countries, profiles of how they're investing in data for development. And this is to serve as a source of dialogue and as something that we can build on going forward to see how we might coordinate better in the future. And I'm very happy that both Poland and Korea have, who are with us today, have profiles in this report, and that we worked very closely together on that. So as I mentioned in the next slide, as I mentioned a moment ago, you know, if we want to have greater coordination and to join forces, we really need to have a much better understanding of who's doing what and where. And in this, we know that about 75% of the ODA to data and statistics is actually data projects in sectors. So in health, in education, in agriculture, etc. Health information management systems is a case in point. And as the World Development Report and many others, you know, are showing, there are key challenges there around the interoperability and the duplication of parallel systems that are created by the great ideas to support another data project in the sector, and so there really is a challenge there. In the DAC members that we've been working with, there is actually no focal point or specific team on data for development. They're generally people who are around the place, but there isn't a dedicated unit, with the exception possibly of the United Kingdom and USAID. Coherence is really important. Doing coordination, as all of you will know, is extremely difficult. So we talk a lot about it. Doing it and achieving it is really hard, and that's where we're at now in terms of the next step. Next slide, a key lesson and insight from us in terms of the funding, and here you'll see a very nuanced picture, and I don't need to go into too much detail, but if you look at I'm looking at the chart, changes in average annual disbursements, that figure, you'll see that support for general statistical capacity is actually on the decline, whereas you're seeing a nuanced picture here that health, economic data, agricultural data, gender data, environment data, they're the areas where a lot of the ODA investments are going into, but less on the foundational side. And a takeaway from our analysis here is that if certain data gaps or needs, you know, are a priority in a sector, they will get funding. So the funding is there for the sectoral work. So the question is, how do you invest in data and sectors in a way that also builds up the country capacities, that builds up country systems, and doesn't do any harm or undermine those systems? So that's a key question. And we just repeat again, statistical capacity and foundational systems are not a priority. When we come to development cooperation, the next slide, we really have reached a point now where we really are seeing a very compelling case here about the mutual benefits of increasing the effectiveness of investments in data and statistical systems. So on the one hand, we see that support for data is a means to ensure development effectiveness, right? Because if you're more data driven, you can be more effective, you can reach the SDGs, you can identify who's left behind, you can really meet the shared agenda around the SDGs. And at the same time, we are supporting statistical systems as a development objective to build up the capacity of countries. But in that, so it's win-win actually, but at the same time, we see that there is a tension between ensuring the short-term data production we need for projects and programs in a way that it doesn't undermine the long-term development of systems. Does this have to be a trade-off? Are there win-win strategies? When there is a clear and high national demand for more and better data in the partner countries, development cooperation can align with those priorities more easily. So there is a situation also of the demand side in countries and the political economy of data that we have to be mindful of. But domestic demand in countries can be low, especially relative to the demand for data from development partners. So there really is a tension there. So partner governments, you know, are in a situation where they need to increase the openness and accessibility, as Mallory mentioned, of existing government data, while international development actors need to prevent the fragmentation of the investments in data systems. So for my second last slide, where are we at now and the point of optimism? Right now, we are working very closely with the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation. It has a priority action area on improving support for data and statistical systems. Switzerland is the co-chair of the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, just hosted the UN World Data Forum, and kind of is dovetailing those two leadership roles that it's been playing by really bringing a lot of these questions to the development cooperation policy community to think differently, to get it a little bit out of the statistical mindset and more into the development policy space. And a paper we've done really based on a lot of dialogue is really promoting these three strategic kind of ways forward for effectiveness. We have to find out and develop some guidance around how we can better align data support with countries' long-term needs and priorities, and work through some of the tensions and problems there. There is a whole area of work around strengthening data uptake and use among all stakeholders, very much rings with the World Development Report. And in this digital era, as we have many more actors involved around data issues, we need to rethink and work around much more inclusive and accountable partnerships to realize data potential. I guess that's the social contract manner, but I think there is definitely there. But for us to think in the space of development cooperation, how to work with that and how to be part of the solution. And a stepping stone of the last slide towards that, in coordination, joining forces, matching demand and supply, is that there was a network created, a Bern network on statistics and finance for statistical systems, created involving several development cooperation providers, but also international bodies, including the IMF and the World Bank and the OECD. Very much Paris 21 has provided the secretariat for that. We've just launched at the UN World Data Forum what we're calling a clearinghouse for smarter finance for development data. And the link there can give you a sense of what's in there, but it brings all our profiles in there. It has profiles of developing countries, and the whole objective is to see, can we do some better matchmaking here of demand and supply, and facilitate much more effective and smarter support for statistical systems. So I'd like to stop there and leave with that slide. Look forward to your questions. Happy to share further insights and discuss how we can join forces together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ida. It was really, amazing to hear this, and I feel like, really the timing and position after Malar, and your both view is like, putting all the things together. And actually we have already some questions in the chat box, so we will focus on them, at the end. Maybe I will just pick quickly one to you, Ida. There is a question about, commitments made in Nairobi from Artemy Izmestiev. I'm sorry if I have mispronounced your surname. So how do you see this, how it is?
Yes, so right now in the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, it's got a work plan. There's going to be a high-level meeting at the end of next year. My colleague Martin Lestra is here today as well, because he's very much involved in that. And we are working very closely with, there's an action area 1.2, that really is trying to flesh out, and there are various consultations ongoing, and we would be very happy to relay back to the co-chairs if there is among this group as well interest in a consultation. We've prepared an issues paper on some effectiveness challenges, taking the effectiveness principles and applying them to support for data and statistics, and that's where we're landing on those three issues that I pointed out to at the end. And the idea is to come up with high-level principles and potentially some guidance, good practice guidance on international development cooperation support to data and statistical systems, and to do that over the course of next year. So I would very much welcome the development agencies present today to come and participate also in our working group among development providers. We'll be meeting in February, March next year in our space, fleshing out some of these, but civil society will discuss them. They will also bring them to the business sector, and in other partners working with developing countries. There's an outcome document from a very good consultation last July. So we're working towards the end of next year going from that Nairobi statement and diagnostic to action. And please feel free to contact me. We can put you in touch with the right people if you'd like to join the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ida. I know this was excellent point actually, and it is really like, shifting, to the next presentation we will have, because right now we will have a presentation from one of the agencies, working on this, speaking about the data. This is one of the top-notch examples we were able to find. So I'm really, really glad to welcome today Jason, who is actually from Korean International Cooperation Agency. And he is manager for data innovation team. So Jason, over to you, and welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Jason Bae from KOICA. First of all, I really appreciate UNDP Istanbul Regional Office and OECD for inviting me to share KOICA's experiences in data innovation or data management, which is also quite a new journey from the point of digital transformation strategy of KOICA. Today, I'm going to introduce South Korea's open data policy, and then we'll share KOICA's data innovation journey. So as all of you guys might be aware of it, we are in the stage of first industrial revolution. Most of renowned professors and CEOs from high-tech industry say that data is a new capital of the fourth industrial revolution. And some people compare that the data is a crude oil or rice of 21st century. Please look at this picture, which explains the importance of data. When we compare some technologies to the human body, data could be a source of knowledge creation. It means blood provides nutrition by interconnecting the components from our body. So as today's participants are from the Ministry or Development Agency mostly, so we need to pay attention to the data for development. So I'd like to move to second part, South Korea's open data policy. I'm sorry that the picture is really small to see. So Korean government launched the Korean New Deal in response to the COVID-19 pandemic era. The Korean New Deal has three main pillars, including the Digital New Deal, Green New Deal, and strengthening employment and the social safety nets. With the aim to accelerate the transition towards a digital economy, investment will focus on the integration of data, network, and AI. We call it DNA. So as today's agenda is data for development, I'd like to share the perspective of data, of course. So we followed this open data chart consists of 6 pillars. This open data charter is a kind of global standard which G8 countries leaders signed on 18th June 2013. So as you can see, global open data charter consists of 5 categories, and Korean ODC is also similar to the global ODC. So first principle is open data by default, timely and comprehensive, accessible and reproducible, compatible and interoperable, and for improved governance and public participation, and for inclusive development and innovation. So we mainly focus on the data economy, how to create data economy efficiently and effectively. By following the Korean Open Data Charter, Ministry of Home Affairs Korea has opened the Korean Open Data Portal. So it is not possible to open any data to this public data portal. Since it is recommended to open data set, it is generally opened in the format of CSV. So I guess you are familiar with Microsoft Excel format. So yeah, you can think that CSV is kind of MS Excel format and open API. So it means open API means the protocol of communication, how IT developers authenticate users and collect data by linking with different system or programs. And from the point of KOICA as an international development agency, as well as public agency of Korean government, we are requested to open the better data and more data to this Korean government open data portal. So our internal guideline for open data has 4 pillars. First one is initial data collection is of course important. And second one, ensuring data as well as database of our system, IT system itself, quality. And third one is standardization of report or any documents. And last one is standardized code of country. It means giving the same number of codes to search data effectively. Here, I'd like to show you a few samples of KOICA's open data. Korean government provides English version of open data as well. So if you are interested in, you can access to domain address data.go.kr. Yeah, this is an open API format. Now let's move to the third part, KOICA's data innovation journey. So from the end of 2020 to early 2021, KOICA has established KOICA's digital transformation strategy from 2021 to 2025. This KOICA's digital transformation strategy is, of course, aligned to Korean government digital New Deal in response to COVID-19. So in this KOICA digital transformation strategy, we targeted 4 areas: business, customer, process, and capabilities. So our point is that KOICA would like to ensure data-based decision-making process and enlarge digital access to our partner countries. So we would like to make digital ODA platform as well as to make better performance management or internal project management system to increase how we work and improve our work efficiency. So while setting up the this KOICA's digital transformation strategy, we found that the precondition should be the data management, of course. So it means we need to settle data governance and data quality and policy and guidelines. When you see the data governance, so we need to focus on what mandatory key data entry by business stage and who should be putting the data and who should be inspect the data to ensure the quality of data and database of our internal project management system. And of course, when is it also important to set the review cycle to ensure accuracy for each data. So yeah, I'd like to introduce data governance more. So establishment of strategy and business management part, we would like to see the identify development needs and implement evidence-based policies and projects. The point is that we need to ensure that KOICA's development program is well organized and well managed. And so, yeah, in this point of view, we focus on the enhancement of convenience in response to our partner agencies and project evaluation and research. We need to prove the scientific evidence by ensuring our international development project performance. And as the KOICA is also the development agency and the public agency of Korean government, so of course we should open data to public. So I would like to move to next part to share that our challenges to make data governance. A key question is that how to open the KOICA's data effectively to the public. So first sub question goes to how to improve understanding of the environment. So the work process should be like this. The first step is to analyze donors' development partnership policy and activities. And then we need to focus on how are leading domestic and overseas partners opening their data. So we have benchmarked World Bank and ADB and GIZ or USAID or Canada, etc. And then KOICA's data open channel operations status, we internally make our open data portal system. So I'm sorry that this is a Korean version, and maybe till only next year we will rebuild this international development open data portal as an English version. And I'm happy to share that we report our statistical development data to OECD iLibrary. In this OECD iLibrary, you can see Koreans' commitment and disbursement, as you can see. So a point is that ensuring that aid transparency is really important. So we, KOICA internally, we managed our statistical data effectively, efficiently, day by day. And the last part, I would like to share the KOICA's sample of program result data. So this is a healthcare program data. As the KOICA's data innovation journey is quite new to our KOICA. So from 2021 to, so from 2020 to this year, we have collected our healthcare program data. And then you can see the health sector targeting area under the health sector midterm strategy of KOICA. And as we have collected the healthcare programs, some performance data quite newly, so that I guess maybe next target would be collect every sector data of KOICA, such as some public, some digital area, also digital ODA program, including digital ODA program, and agricultural and other sector program also. So in summary, I definitely agree with Malavizi and Aida's summary that openness and accessibility is quite important for development. And we still have a long way to go in data governance from the point of each development agency. So yeah, this is all for my presentation. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason. It was really impressive, and I have to say, that I'm still impressed from the overview of the health sector as someone who has got a background in this field. So thank you so much for this. And right now, we will go on a lower level, and we will focus on not only the level of the agency itself, but on a particular project and particular initiative, because Kateřina Rozeslanec from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who was formerly also, secondee at the UNDP Istanbul Regional Hub, will present, the outcomes of policy brief, which collected data from air quality sensors to show the correlations with COVID-19 spread. So thank you, Kasia, and over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Eva, for this kind introduction. And it is a pleasure to be here again. And thank you, colleagues from the IRH and from OECD for inviting me. Actually, my name is Kateřina Rozeslanec. I represent the Polish MFA Development Cooperation Department. And not that long ago, until October this year, I was part of partnerships team at the IRH developing Polish UNDP partnership. And I was in the role of a moderator of one of the ODA series back in June, which was co-hosted with the Polish MFA on innovation in development. So it's nice to be back in the new role. And today I will share with you outcomes and conclusions of a case study which was recently conducted and published under UNDP Development Future Series entitled Air Quality Monitoring Data for Analysis of the Pace and Intensity of the COVID-19 Spread in Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans, where both me and Eva were involved. So the study is really close to our hearts, let's put it that way. Next slide, please. To begin with, just a small introduction about how did it all begin for us and what was the context of creating this study. So the Polish MFA and its development branch, Polish Aid, began close cooperation with the IRH in late 2019 under the Polish Challenge Fund modality, which serves as a tool for identifying, selecting, and awarding most innovative solutions, ideas, and know-how provided by the Polish private sector and academia, in order to transfer them to selected priority countries to contribute to development purposes and implementation of the SDGs. So far, under this modality, we selected 15 projects which were implemented in the Republic of Belarus, in Georgia, in Ukraine, and in Moldova. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yes, and one of the awardees under the first edition of the Polish Challenge Fund was the Polish company Early, a company from the south of Poland, Krakow, with a mission of making air quality visible and understandable to all, and manufacturing tools for measuring air quality. So they manufacture sensors, they also manage air quality database, and they have a mobile app for phones which tracks air pollution and monitors air quality in real time. This company is actually a big success story in Poland, receiving both national and international attention. It is worth mentioning that the founder was identified by Forbes on a list of 30 before 30, which identifies, the most promising businessmen and businesswomen as future business leaders. And as part of their project done with UNDP and the Polish MFA under the Polish Challenge Fund in Belarus, they installed 12 sensors in 6 different locations in Belarus and conducted a campaign on smog and air pollution. And the tool was scaling up in the region. Currently, there are over 400 sensors available in 30 countries, including Serbia, North Macedonia, Ukraine, and Bosnia from IRH region. Next slide, please. As I said, cooperation developed, and then an opportunity popped up to present a successful solution under the Development Future Series, which is a UNDP platform for sharing evidence and sharing practical insights that are grounded on really deep study, data, and practice for future of sustainable development. And we decided to deep dive into the topic and bring insights from our region and present it as a policy brief. because air pollution is a major public health threat and one of the main environmental problems in developing countries. So we decided the moment was right to present this study to a wider audience. So the final study is really a common work of UNDP IRH team, scientists from EARLY and from the Polish University of Science and Technology in Krakow. And maybe we could share the link to the study also in the chat box, or I can do it after my presentation, so you can check the details if you are interested. Next slide, please. Thank you. So really the study measures the correlation between outdoor air quality and heightened transmission rates or case severity of COVID-19 cases. And the phenomenon has been recognized in previous studies. And initial results show that an increase of only 1 microgram per cubic meter in PM 2.5 is associated with an 11% increase in the COVID-19 death rate. So, so this is something significant, but there's still very limited data available on air quality and its correlation with COVID-19, which of course affects policy preparation and developing national strategies. For this particular study, the data was acquired from EARLY's network of sensors between November 2020 and March 2021. Which in our region is winter season, characterized by worse air quality due to emissions from heating mostly. The solution tracks all key pollution markers and their concentration, which includes particulate matters such as PM1, PM 2.5, PM10, as well as gases, but also other factors such as air temperature, humidity, and pressure. And first, data analysis on the relationship between the rates of COVID-19 and deaths and correlation with air quality was done in Poland, but it was repeated in a set of countries. On the one hand, 3 Central and Eastern Europe countries, so Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. And on the other hand, 3 selected Balkan countries, Serbia, North Macedonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And as a reference point, 2 countries from the north of Europe were added to the study, Norway and Denmark, because they are characterized by such a good air quality that we wanted to have a reference point. Can we go to the next slide, please? Here we can see the results, which show that, well, what was also supported in earlier studies, air pollution can catalyze the spread of the virus because it results that small air particles such as PM 2.5 and PM10 can carry the virus on their surfaces, and the exposure to the risk of infection is increased, especially in high population density areas. Here in the graph, you can see the number of COVID-19 deaths throughout the end of March 2021, and it's combined with PM 2.5 concentration from November 2020 to March 2021. So the 2 parameters were compared and the correlation was calculated by the scientists. And for both phenomena, we witnessed a correlation which shows that 0.88 for the number of deaths and 0.58 for the number of cases, respectively. That's the correlation between air pollution and COVID-19 outcomes. However, the study does not imply a direct relationship between those 2 factors, because there are plenty of other factors that we have to take into consideration, such as population density or healthcare quality in different countries, or age of the population, or restrictions that were implemented, such as lockdowns, or different testing methods. So we need to remember that other factors matter, of course, too. The results show us that bad air quality, especially in the Balkans, is contributing to facilitating COVID-19 pandemic outcomes. And what was interesting for us was Serbia, because in Serbia, the relationship between air pollution and COVID-19 cases show that the number of cases for Serbia was the highest among the selected countries, but the number of deaths was the lowest of the Balkan countries. So Serbia is the case where air pollution remains on a moderate level, but apparently other factors were of bigger significance than air quality for COVID-19. And very quickly, can we go to the next slide for conclusions? Where does it leave us? So this opens a wide area for discussion on diverse topics and policies. And so we can shape important insights for planning governmental responses based on data. So the calculation and the data in general, if used in decision-making processes, can allow better allocation of financial, medical, and other resources, of course, and it's worth carrying similar studies in different countries. And it is also important to raise awareness for need of coordinated cross-sectoral approach to air quality management in connection with health sector planning. If you're interested, please check our study, and this is all on my end. So thank you very much again for inviting me, and over to you, Eva.
Thank you, Kasia. Thank you so much. Actually, I have shared, the link to the policy brief in the chat, and we will share all of the presentation and all of the resources with all participants by email. So do not worry, you will not lose it if you are not really following the links in the chat. And actually, I see that Dumitru Vasilescu, our colleague from UNDP country office in Moldova, has also shared UNDP policy brief on the air quality in Moldova and Ukraine. And actually, because Dumitru knows, how it is, he knows the tools, for example, from the Polish Challenge Fund, he knows the cooperation, with different national agencies, but also international players like OECD, and World Bank. So I feel like it will be great to give a floor for a few minutes to Dumitru also to share his experience from UNDP country office. So Dumitru, hello, and over to you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much, and thank you again for UNDP and OECD for the kind invitation. I have a few slides. But before that, I would really like to mention a few points. One is Moldova is a country in which, let's say, the interest for data and for new types of data is growing. There is more and more interest and demand from the government and the counterparts, and in UNDP, we do have few streams of work under this data for development, let's say, chapeau. I will focus on few of them. I think if we go to the next slide, our philosophy so far was quite simple and straightforward. We were from 2018 focused on developing this data collaboratives concept, a concept through which we managed so far to enter into deep partnerships with a few stakeholders, starting from the European Space Agency and going into the private sector to telecom and energy distribution companies and academia. So far, under this collaboratives concept, let's say, we built several layers of data, including Earth observation data, big data, and sick data. And there are a few slides afterwards, few examples. I will show to all of you how this works. And so far also we've created several use cases. Probably the most important ones are those focused on the impact of COVID on a few areas, air pollution being one, agriculture and agricultural practices being another one, on human mobility and so on. There is another very important stream actually prioritized these days by the government, which is a stream on through which we've developed and delivered and are delivering services around COVID-19 monitoring and monitoring of spread of COVID-19 cases, and a few other streams. If you go to the next slide, you will see already, let's say, what I mentioned in a more structured way. We started with the development of few basic services, those on land use, land cover, with very kind support of the European Space Agency colleagues. We were indeed also collaborating throughout the process a lot with our National Statistics Bureau, but also with the private sector. In the second let's say step for us was to develop basic layers on population density and distribution, daytime and nighttime. And after that, indeed, we've proceeded with development of few case studies, as I just mentioned. Just to add here that indeed, because of the very rich data sets and very interesting and deep partnerships with few stakeholders, we managed already also to go into measurements or estimation of some of the SDG indicators, for instance, which is very exciting work here. And we did some experimental work on few indicators, as will be shown later, but there are about 30 indicators or 25 indicators that we would like really to have similar work done in the next year. If we move to the next slide, I will showcase just as an example for the SDG 11 2.2.1, access to transportation, essentially using those layers, as I mentioned, on the land use, land cover, population density distribution. We've produced this another layer on access of population to public transportation. What you can see are the transportation routes and nodes and public transportation stations in the capital city, and we've worked also in a few other locations of the country. This is really something very, very interesting and part of the plan of statistical works of the National Bureau of Statistics for upcoming period. If we go to the next slide, I will briefly showcase what we did for the COVID services. So essentially, based on the request from the Prime Minister's office here, we developed few COVID services and few indicators. You have an example of an indicator here, which we codified stay at home. So it gives at any point in time, with daytime or nighttime, a percentage of population staying or not leaving their home district. This was by home districts in the capital city, but essentially it was then scaled to the whole of the country, and was a very interesting, useful exercise also to monitor the way people react to the lockdowns. So it was also a measure for government to understand how to better target those restrictive measures, how people are or are not respecting the lockdown restrictions and so on. Next slide, please. We also, let's say, developed a service on average travel radius. So we were monitoring not just the stay at home, but also the distance that people are making during daytime and nighttime, and it gives also a very interesting indication on the impact that the COVID produced and the longer term impact in terms of mobility poverty. On the right hand side, you can see also our analysis of the mobility. We were able to spot those locations in the urban and rural areas in which there was higher mobility than what was expected or what was requested by the authorities. That was also a signal for the government, to intervene in those areas when and where needed. Next slide, please. This is probably the most advanced service that we were able to produce, and I would then also invite other colleagues. We are ready to partner with you on this front. It is a service assessing the risk of COVID spread by use of previously mentioned layers of data. On top of it, we had 112 data on COVID cases, but also electricity consumption data and mobility data. So essentially, the service was indicative of the risk of COVID spread, because we were seeing that in areas in which energy consumption was going down and mobility going up, we were seeing the increase in number of 112 cases. And that was also a modality for us to predict the growing number of cases in few raions or few districts of the country. And last slide, it is essentially on the way forward. I think this concept was tested, the concept of data collaboratives in our definition, and we would very much like to add new partner services and use cases. That's one. Because of some data sets that we would like to use in the future are not that easily accessible because of the restrictions and data protection rules and regulations, we are thinking also about some sort of an open algorithm system in which we will be sending the questions or queries to data. So we would be further engaging into deeper partnerships. These new evidences were, as I mentioned, increasingly used for policy work, but also for experimentation work in UNDP Moldova with support of the Slovak government. We aim at the same time as a way forward to increase the use of what is less used. Some of the colleagues before mentioned the graveyards of data. There are so many interesting data sets that can be used to estimate SDG indicators, and I provided just one of the few examples. And last but not least, as I mentioned, because of the growing interest of the government to use new evidence for better policy decisions, our intention for end of this year, beginning of next year, is to support with the development and implementation of an intelligence unit for policy development, at the core of which there will be our concept of data collaboratives and our previous and current work on data. Thank you, Eva. I hope I managed in the 5 minutes, and over to you.
Thank you, Dumitru. Thank you so much. And it was really like, nice overview of all of the possible approaches. And before we will jump on a Q&A session, it will be great, to play a short game to see if we all get the intakes of today's session. So please grab your mobile phones, and I would like to ask Maria to launch the meta game. So please prepare your mobile phones, and you can use and go to www.menti.com and enter this code, or you can use your camera on your mobile phone and scan the QR code. And we will have 5 questions with the biggest intakes from today's session. So I'm giving you a few seconds to join us. It is not necessary to log in. It's not necessary to change the name. You can even play with a game given from Menti. And I'm giving additional seconds to everyone to join us. And we can go. So amazing. Amazing to see you all there. Very nice. Great. So I guess we can start with the first question. So try to answer as fast as possible and to get the more points. So financing for data capacity and systems in partner countries is increasing, stagnating, or decreasing. So the financing is increasing, stagnating, or decreasing. Last 3 seconds and time's up. Actually, it is stagnating, and the first answer with most of you is not right. It is stagnating, how it was said by Ida. So we can move to the next question. Question number 2. So a critical platform for facilitating partnerships and coordination for more effective and smarter finance for data is cleaning box, clearing home, or clearing check. Time is up. And the right question is, yes, it is clearinghouse. And we can go to the next question. So Data for Better Lives has been published by World Bank in 2019, 2020, or 2021. What is the right question? And as most of you answered right, so it was 2021. And we are going to the end. So question number 4. South Korea's open data portal is open data, open portal, or DataGo. So which is, the name of the website? Okay, so I know it maybe sounds a little bit difficult, but it is actually the right question for these 6 right answers. And we will see who will be the winner after the very last question, which is going on right now. So try to answer as fast as possible. Data for the air quality analysis in Central Europe and Balkans were collected by sensors of early, windy, or breezy. Which of the sensors were used? Early, windy, or breezy? And the last 3 seconds. Yes, amazing. Early. So yeah, like, let's be honest, right? This sounds like, high school questions, with all of the possible variations. So who is the winner? It looks like Malar is the winner. What a surprise, top-notch expert win. So thank you so much. I hope it was a little bit of fun. And let's move to the questions we have in the chat box and also which, pop up during the discussion. So actually, I would like to start with Malar, our winner, and Ida, and also Jason, because we were discussing a lot of how to collect the data, which reports you get, and what are the results. And we only slightly touched the question that the data at the end are kind of a power. They give you the power to really make good decisions, but they can be at the end also harmful. So I'm really asking, how to really collect the data without doing no harm. What are the procedures you are following? And what will be, if you can have one suggestion for someone who is a newcomer or, just at the beginning with collecting the data, for example, some development agency, what will be, your advice? So I will start with Malar.
I think it's a really great question, Eva, especially when, I think there was one thread that followed across all presentations is, this potential of bringing together different types of data together, and you overlay, this data, and, we saw some really great examples, especially with Dimitri, provided at the very end of the presentation too. So I think for anybody who's sort of going to collect data, I don't even think you have to be new, right? You could be someone who's been doing this for many years. I think it's very, very important to keep in mind the safeguards that you need to put in place when you're collecting data. And one of the sometimes misconception is also that, I collect a certain type of data that may not be personally identifiable. But then when I start kind of mixing and integrating data together, it could become personally identifiable. So it's important to keep that in mind. And also, I think there are certain principles. A lot of the partners here and many of the, many countries and development organizations are publishing principles for responsible data use. I think it's important to, ODA has my personal favorite. I think they have a really great document on the principles of personal data use. They even have, kind of the decisions that you would take at every stage of your data life cycle. That's a great document to start with. There are several other documents also that you can sort of follow and understand how what kind of decisions you want to take at every stage of the life cycle. When you're collecting the data, when you're managing the data, how you're securely protecting the data. And these decisions vary depending on the types of data that you collect. So that would be sort of the starting point. And the next step would be, I think Jason produced some really great points on the approaches of making data openly available. I think it's always important to keep in mind data transparency. The end goal of trying to make as much as information publicly available, documenting, the journey of the data, what you've done to the data. Sometimes the data itself may not be made accessible, but you could still make some of the, programs that you've used to construct some of the data or to produce the analysis, transparently available. And OPAL is a great initiative. I think Dimitri mentioned that, just getting to know some of this, these developments are I think would be super helpful for anybody who is working with data collection and management and use. I'll just stop with that, with those 2 points. Eva, thanks.
Thank you. Like, I have to say that, that you have pointed, the basic issues. So I will go over to Ida and maybe, ask her, if she can focus on the security of the data you have collected and the cyber security, because, this is a hot topic. So like, how do you see this,
Okay, well, thanks, Eva. I am not an expert in cybersecurity, but it's certainly an issue that is emerging in our work right now, because our forthcoming development cooperation report is titled Shaping a Just Digital Transformation. And among the many issues that are coming up, and our lens is always coming back to development cooperation policy, right? Where we're not defining what is cybersecurity, but we're really trying to apply the lens of what this means for how our members design the right policies for development cooperation. And just to say there's no duplication with what other expert communities are doing. But cybersecurity is emerging as an issue, and it's emerging as an issue where there is a sense that most countries are on a journey on this one and are not really equipped. If you think about the public sector per se, I'm Irish. A few months ago, there was a big ransom issue with in the health sector and the health system, and the Ministry of Health was not prepared for that situation. The same has happened in the United States. And so I think there's a general point here around cybersecurity worldwide in a very fast-paced area of work. So I would prefer not to get into that per se, other than I think there's a lot of emerging work now. The OECD is working on cybersecurity, where we're developing guidance and thinking through the practical aspects of this in terms of capacity, in terms of the type of softwares you have, in terms of updates, all that stuff that I'm just learning about. I'm not a subject matter expert. But on your question around harm and advice, Maller, all those points, I won't repeat what Maller said, but when we come to the development cooperation business, we had a very, very interesting incident this summer with Afghanistan. And when we talk about transparency of development cooperation, of, let's say, ODA, of how we evaluate our work, etc., and some of the challenges that we face, where transparency is so important, because that can enable the accountability, that enables the beneficiaries to say, well, where is this aid money going? What results is it achieving, etc., etc. We have very, very strong principles to uphold. At the same time, we have in our databases potentially information that could put individuals at risk if it gets into the wrong hands. Now, it's not just the aid data, but when a situation and when we work in very fragile settings where we have changes in regime, etc., how are we much more prepared in terms of how we manage data and our strategies around data, so that to manage for the unintended consequences of potentially transparency? These are conversations we need to have. There's no rule around this. And we have to be very, very mindful that there's no one solution, because there are potentially, what are the trade-offs, and to map the trade-offs. You can remove all of the aid data and the details about projects in regions of Afghanistan, but do you do that in Yemen? Do you do that in Syria? Do you do that elsewhere? Is that the right solution? We are having conversations around that now. And so knee-jerk kind of ways of managing this, we need to be much more prepared than that. And frankly, realistic too, and have our eyes wide open that data is probably available. But major issues are also emerging in Afghanistan around the investments in digital ID systems, and thinking through the level of detail that the international community seems to want to get down to the individual level. And what Maller says, when you merge data sets, you can maybe potentially identify where people are. So what do we do in terms of how we design our data work, how we design our questionnaires, how we go around a new digital ID system. Yeah, some countries can have 10 digital ID systems. And we talk about interoperability, but we're not necessarily very good at interoperability. And these are major issues that we need to, as a community, come together rather than our siloed approaches to various initiatives, and really map out and think about some of those unintended consequences, because the intent is a very positive intent of a lot of these initiatives. And my last point around harm, which is not about individual harm, I think we need to think about the extent to which we are building up the capacity within the countries to manage the data, to govern the data, to produce the data that they need, and hopefully then how the development cooperation sector can align with those data and not go off producing tons and tons of data that's relevant for various projects, but rather meet the needs of the countries. And I'm quite passionate about that, so forgive me to maybe take a level of energy around that, but I think this is a critical issue in development cooperation, and we really need to work it out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ida. I fully agree. And, it was really like a grain point, the fact that, actually it's not always about collecting the data, because there are a lot of data already available. So it's also about, approach to these available data already. So, but, before we will go to the next question, I would like to also give a space quickly to Jason, besides, what has been shared from Malar and Ida. How do you see it? What is your, the biggest lesson learned, speaking up about it, of doing no harm, and what is the key approach, speaking about, the experience of KOICA?
Okay, thank you. So actually, from point of KOICA view, the most important point is that by ensuring data quality, so we need to make the data-driven management effectively. So there are two ways of data analysis. First one is top-down approach, and the second one is bottom-up approach. So actually, even KOICA and many other new, some kind of developed country has kind of top-down approach. I think top-down approach should be more applicable rather than bottom-up approach. If some agency has more data, if the quantity is a lot, if you have a lot of data to analyze, you can proceed bottom-up approach to see the insight or the meaning of the data. If not, I think to make the appropriate purpose or correct purpose first, and then after that, some getting insight is more useful. And then today's seminar, I was really impressed by Moldova's experience also. So KOICA as well, we would like to implement all lots of data for development projects itself. Honestly speaking, till now, so far, we don't have lots of data for development projects. As far as I remember, maybe in Morocco, we have one project for implementing or establishing data center for Morocco government. And from under the KOICA's digital transformation strategy, every year we will open our chapter to spread more and better digital or data for development project itself. And then I think our partner countries should be enhanced their capacity for managing development projects or data to make some data-driven management of development project, international cooperation project. Yeah, thank you for giving this opportunity again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Our time is running very fast. So we have a time for the last 2 questions. And Dumitru is going to leave very soon. I have just a very brief question to Dumitru and also Kasia, because it was originally a question to Kasia in the chat box. But, speaking about the data, can you share with us, the experience when the data actually at the end to lead to some changes in policy practice?
Yes, thank you. Yes, indeed, we are seeing very interesting now developments in one of our streams, which is to use alternative sources of data to estimate population numbers. Just as an example, and we have this service we have extensively used for the time being mobility data set from telecom, but also electricity consumption data set. And what we are seeing indeed is what is the gap, what is the difference between what census data from 2014 says and what are the probably more accurate data given the mobility, given the electricity use, etc. So I think, and together with the government under this intelligence unit for policy development, as I mentioned, under few streams, I think we will be infusing or I don't know, co-developing, co-designing these services in so many areas that are to be used actually for be it tactical decisions, as in the case of the COVID-19 services, as I described, but also for development of new strategies and new, let's say, policy. And then there are many other examples I can elaborate.
Okay, thank you, and quickly to Kasia.
Thank you for this question. Actually, our study is quite fresh. It was published only in September this year, so we cannot really say anything about concrete changes in policies based on that. However, this is an excellent forum, I think, for leaving this hanging or as food for thought for everyone here, for decision makers, for development policy practitioners, to bring it forward and reflect on policy changes based on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's indeed true. And because also Malawi needs to leave and we need to end. So I will give a floor to Sydney with a question. And yeah, over to you, Sydney. Hello.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, good. No, just a brief question. And some of you already touched upon this, but I know that in the virtual room, there is some people from different evaluation and results unit in providers of development cooperation. I'd be curious to know if there are examples of how some providers are linking their results framework or the evaluation framework and the data they gather through these exercises and the data for development agenda and strengthening of capacities or strengthening of the data landscape in developing countries.
Okay, thank you, Sydney. Maybe over to you, Malawi, if you can answer this.
Thanks, Sydney, for that question. I personally feel that I think we have a lot of work to do in order to measure results and track how well we're doing in terms of projects, especially that's linked to data. Because most of the time we see that data is like a subcomponent of another larger project, and we don't really track how we engage with the data sets, even along the data capacity or building systems or working on data governance reforms. So I think on the World Bank side, I think we're really now ramping up our efforts to set targets and measure results, at least in the project, in our own lending projects and grants and other work that we do with our partners. We're just beginning, this is something we've realized is something we have to now do, especially considering, our approach and new approaches that we are bringing in our own engagements, operational projects with countries. So I don't have a framework to present, but what I can point to is maybe 2 things that we've started, which is sort of step in that direction. One is the release of the statistical performance indicators. I just kind of put in the chat window some details and links to that, the new set of indicators. That framework is supposed to, we've designed it in a way that it's more forward-looking in spite of, lack of data resources, like for instance, measuring the use of private intent data or the use of citizen generated data. And there's, we're continuously doing improvements, but the idea is using some of those measurements to be able to track the state of data systems in different countries, and use it as a motivation to track how how we are progressing towards really reaching some of our ambitious goals that we have in ways that data systems operate. The other thing, the second aspect of improvement that we're doing is having tracking data projects more effectively in our own lending and operational targets, in our own workflows, in the way we report to our partners like OECD and others, IATI and others, but also internally in our own workflows, how we measure data projects and how we report to our management to have a better understanding of progress made, results, lessons learned, and that sort of thing. And hopefully we'll be able to report more on that in the coming days. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure, if we will have more time, that we will be able, to deep dive more into the data and get more from that. I'm sure that it will be amazing to really, for example, explore, the way how to really engage the local partners, especially speaking about, this kind of situation when, the crisis of the coronavirus is ongoing and you really need to, for example, collect the data on the remote settings. I'm sure it will be also interesting to, for example, discuss which kind of tools to use for this, which kind of applications, because, the market is growing very well, speaking about, for example, the application on mobile phones, which you can use for the data collection. I am sure that the ethics and, collection of the data is also, very vast, area when we can really discuss the details. And at last, but definitely not the least, I'm sure, that we need to really focus on the way how we are building our capacities, and to also focus on the fact that the partnership matter. But I'm sorry, we have already go over the time. So right now, I would like to thank you all for coming today. My special thanks goes to speakers for the presentations and for this vivid discussion. And many thanks to OECD for partnering with UNDP on this capacity building webinars. And please do not forget to join us for the next webinar. We'll meet on November 5th, 17, and we will discuss the way how is green recoveries aligned with sustainable development. So thank you all and see you in 3 weeks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.